Hi, everyone. Welcome to this interview I'm doing with Sue Brayne, who lives in England. And I am so excited to talk to her because she's one of the few astrologers who I feel is similar to me in terms of our belief and how it can change people's lives and also her method of doing astrology. So, Sue, welcome. I'm so excited to talk to you and to introduce you to all of my friends and clients and whoever happens to find us out there in the world. So, first of all, let's start by talking about our history. We both studied with Stuart Wilde, and I found him to be one of the most amazing teachers of my life. And most people don't know anything about him. So, can
Yeah.
you tell everyone a little bit about what
Oh,
you did with
okay.
Stuart?
I can feel as if I can own him a bit more than you because he was half British.
Right, that's true.
He was
That's
half
true.
British and half Italian. And a father was, I think, a diplomat or something. But
Mhm.
oh boy, I used to call him the second-hand car dealer of the New Age movement. I mean, that summed him up beautifully because I've never met anyone like Stuart, and I don't, well, I mean, obviously we're all totally unique in the way we express ourselves, but for my first teacher, he was awesome. So I went out to Taos, New Mexico to do his Warriors Wisdom training, and that included things like fire walking, go, what? Being tied together in a team, trying to chase a pig. I remember doing that. And well, we're throwing ourselves out of enormously high trees. I mean, we did a lot of high ropes as well. We did sweat lodges. I mean, I'd never done anything like that in my life. So he just blew me open to, oh my God, there's an awful lot more to life than I and myself than I really understood. So, and it's a sad tale because he found it really difficult to be here anyway because he was so different. And he did die of drink. There's no doubt about it. But when he was in his heyday, and I think that's when you and I met him, he was awesome.
Right. And what I found about him that was so fantastic is I loved his humor. I have a personal belief, tell me if you feel the same way. Like if I have a teacher who doesn't make me laugh, I
Yeah,
don't find it's that helpful for me. Like they've got to have a great sense of humor.
yeah.
And he was funny.
And he was totally irreverent.
Yes, and that's probably why I
He
thought it was funny. And
totally irreverent. He
he
did it
told
his way.
me, and I went to the same thing as Sue. I was in the Warriors in the Mist in New Mexico. And I was in my early 30s at the time, and it totally changed my life. I
Yeah.
felt like I just got popped wide open. And he told me that his goal in life was to become a used bicycle salesperson in India. That was his aspiration. He didn't want all the fame. And he also, most people don't realize it, that he was the teacher of the modern day metaphysical teachers we have today. So
Oh God,
like
yes.
Deepak Chopra and
Yeah.
but most people have never heard of him. And I just am glad we can talk about him and maybe introduce a
Yeah.
new generation of people to his books. He has a lot of books that are really great.
And some of them are a bit dodgy. The later ones are, but
Yeah,
the early
I
ones
don't go to
are
those. Like the Whispering Winds of Change, that's a little weird.
absolutely fun and terrific to read now because he saw what was coming, and he used to talk to us. Go, you wait in X number of decades, life will completely change. So he saw it all. He was a seer.
Yes, he was a very, very
Yeah.
unusual person. And do you find, Sue, that people like if you probably know just from looking at your own chart, those of us who have these gnarly charts, they come with great abilities, but it makes it a little harder to be on this earth plane, right? You just made a face like, yeah, I relate to that.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It's
Exactly. So
exhausting.
let's get back to astrology. So
Yes.
I know Stuart and we both shared him as a teacher. We met him in real life, which was a huge blessing. And that's how I connected with Sue. I saw her website. I don't remember how. And I saw that she studied with Stuart Wilde. And I was like, oh my God, to meet her. So we just instantly hit it off. And I don't instantly hit it off with astrologers because I believe there are two types of astrologers. There are engineers and there are poets. And I feel like you and I are both more poetic and into
Mm.
how we do things. Do you agree with that?
Gosh, it's interesting, isn't it? How everybody, I mean, every astrologer is has their own way of doing
Right.
stuff, don't they? And there's some astrologers who are very technical, and there's some that are very mythological, you know, and there's some that are very fanciful, and some who are, you know, whatever. But yes, we all do it differently, don't we? Definitely.
And that's why it's great for people to go to different astrologers.
Yes.
There could be a way that I do it that is useful for one part of your life, and then someone else can give you an insight that I would never have come up with.
Yeah.
Because I always explain astrology as if you're born with a piece of music, and it can be interpreted 20 different ways. And so I think that's very exciting.
Yeah.
So how did you first get started in astrology? When did you have your first reading?
Oh God, this is a long, long time ago. This is when I was in my 30s. Actually, I had a very checkered early life, very checkered. But that came to a very abrupt halt because I survived a light aircraft crash, and that changed my life completely. And it kind of catapulted me onto this healing journey. And so I was just searching and seeking and wanting to know who I was, because I hadn't got a clue. So I was around about 37, 38 when it happened. And I fell into, of course, astrology was all part of the deal. I was, you know, in London then. We had wonderful people like Melanie Reinhardt and, oh gosh, anyway, names have all gone up my head right now. But we had a real core of people teaching astrology. So I was really interested in that. But I was very drawn to go and study with the College of Psychic Studies. Okay. Which I did. So I trained as a medium and a clairvoyant there. And that's where I also met lots of astrologers. And then later on, I was working in a kind of healing center, if you want to call it that. And Judy Hall was very much part of the deal there. And she was a very, very well-known British astrologer. She's dead now, but she was one of the first people also to read my chart. So I've been looking and going to classes and studying astrology for 30 years.
Wow. So was it a plane crash? You said it actually crashed?
Yeah, it did. It was a two-seater Cessna. It wasn't one of, thank God, it wasn't one a huge liner. That wouldn't have been good. But it was, and the fact that we survived is a complete, it's a total miracle, because normally when they come down, you don't survive. But we did. Both of us did, both the pilot and me, we both survived, and neither of us were physically hurt. For me, in fact, I was sitting beside the wreckage of the plane. I'll never forget it, actually, just going, what's happened here?
Wow.
And this sentence just fell into my head: your life is a sham.
What?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That was a total download from spirit.
And it was. It really was. And I knew it was. And I thought, jeeps, if I don't do something about it, it would have been better to have died. So that's what started me on the journey. And synchronistically, somebody left a magazine, because in those days, there was no internet or anything, but somebody left a magazine in my flat with an advert for Stuart's Warrior's Wisdom in Taos, New Mexico. And I went like this. And I went, well, I've got to go to that. So I sold my grandmother's diamond ring that she'd given me to pay to go. I mean, my poor parents, they're just like, you can't do that. I'm going.
That's so funny, because for me with Stuart Wilde, the Warriors in the Mist, it was expensive back then, and I didn't have the money for it. And I knew in my heart that I was supposed to go. And I said, all right, I was in the middle of a lawsuit with someone who had stolen some of my designs. And I said to the heavens, I said, if I win this lawsuit, I promise I will use every ounce of that money to pay for this trip. Yeah. Same thing. I think if you're meant to be in a certain place, especially at a spiritual level, you're going to be shown the way. And it's never anything you go looking for. Have you noticed that? Like, that magazine just happened to be in your flat.
Absolutely.
And then you felt this calling.
Yeah, and when you have, it's the calling. I'm just reading, and in case anybody hasn't read it yet, James Hillman, The Soul's Code, which is all about the calling. It's the most outstandingly wise, reflective, beautifully written book about the call of the soul. I think I'm pretty sure he was definitely interested in astrology.
Yes.
But and a lot of astrologers quote him. But if you want to really understand what the calling of the soul is about, read this book.
Wow, I've never read it, so I'm so
Oh
excited.
my God.
Well, I know James Hillman is amazing.
Yeah.
So great. Thank you for
Yeah.
doing that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So do you actually remember your very first astrology reading?
No,
Now that's interesting.
no, I don't.
Huh. Okay.
No. Do
Back,
you?
back then they would put them on cassette tapes, right? Do you have any cassette tapes of those first readings?
No, but I went to and everybody in England would know this, in Covent Garden, there was the astrology shop.
Okay.
And it had the old printout looking like newspaper print, and you fed your data in there. And I've still got a couple of those charts dating from then. And I got my computer printout with all the computer printing out things about me. I mean, obviously, there's things have moved on since then. So this was the late 80s, the 80s.
Right. And I started studying astrology when it was 1989. So around the same time. No, 89. I was 19. So yeah. And back then we had to do all the charts by hand.
That's
We
right.
didn't have computers. And do you remember the first time you realized that a computer could do a chart for you? How exciting that was?
Unbelievable.
And the
And it
young
was,
people today have no idea how hard it was to master astrology because you had to look up in the effects
yeah.
and
You
plot.
had to have three little books with you. But in fact, I trained with the Faculty of Astrological Studies. And at the first exam, you have to do a chart by hand.
Well, that's
So,
good.
they still insist on that for you to get your diploma with them, so that you actually know how to draw up a chart by hand.
That's really, really smart.
Yeah.
I love that.
I found it really challenging because I'm not great at lists, and being an Aquarian, I kind of give me the bigger picture. So I
Right.
love pressing the button and it's there. But so I in theory I absolutely know how to do that, and it reminded me of when we were doing stuff like that back in the 80s.
Yes, and I remember going to Weiser's bookstore in New York City, which was probably the similar as the astrology shop and that you just talked about.
Yeah.
And I remember walking into these bookstores and being terrified and excited. I felt like those bookstores had the secrets to the universe.
Oh
And
God, yes.
remember, did you ever feel a little bit like excited and overwhelmed and knowing that this was really important, whatever was going on in these stores?
Oh, do you know the weirdest? So this was all around the same time. I was living in a flat in London, and the second room was rented out by somebody, and she worked in a very big new age bookshop called Mysteries, and she would bring books back.
Oh, you're so lucky.
I would read them, and then she'd take them back to the shop. I mean, I could not get enough. I could not drink in enough. I couldn't absorb enough. I couldn't know enough. It was like I had this raging thirst for truth.
Me
That
too.
it was just a raging thirst. It was like a massive addiction that I could not get enough. I could not get satisfied. And then eventually it leveled out, obviously.
I agree with you. I think I had that raging thirst for 20, 25 years because in my bedroom, there were just stacks and stacks of astrology books. And there was nothing else there but astrology books everywhere. And
Yeah.
I was so frustrated though, because, and this is what I find a lot with my students, I would get parts of it, but I never could pull it all together. And now when I teach astrology, that's what I think I'm really good at, helping people pull it all
Yes.
together. But it takes a while, and I don't think you can get to be a really good astrologer until you've studied it for many years. Do you agree?
Oh my goodness me, and the rest. But I think you need a solid base in spirituality as well, and an understanding of the concept of what soul and spirit means, because that's all represented in the chart anyway by the sun and the moon, and how the personality plays its role. Is that the vehicle for the soul to really express itself, and the higher meaning of all of that? This is what I love about William Meader's work. He's the esoteric astrologer, fabulous esoteric teacher. He's the one teacher I still, without fail, will listen to when he does stuff on YouTube. And when he's in England, I really do everything I can to go. And I was fortunate enough to interview him as well. And I loved the gentle approach he has to astrology and the calling of the soul.
Right.
So, you know, it's so James Hillman could be called an esoteric astrologer. And then you've got the lovely Stephen Forrest,
right,
who's the evolutionary astrologer. Now, this tickles me. This turns me on. The concept that the soul is on a journey and we incarnate, and however our astrological charts are configured at the time of our birth, that's our calling. But we don't know it because we're sent into the world without a clue who we are. And I think that's the one beautiful gift that astrology can give us, is if somebody sits down with you with your chart and goes, look, this is why you're more than likely expressing this, or this is a pattern. Do you recognize it? And somebody goes, yeah, I do. Oh my God, bingo. Suddenly they're going, I never knew that. I never knew why I did that.
What I always try to tell people is that it's such a gift that astrology gives you, because you realize it's not your fault. You were designed a particular way.
Absolutely.
Now, and after an astrology reading, it's like it's totally up to you to take care of that.
Yeah.
Because both of us have things in our chart that are very, very difficult.
Yes.
Would you say, when did you start to make peace with your chart? How long did it take?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because you can have a reading, but you're listening to what the person is telling you about yourself.
Right.
And it takes a shift, doesn't it, of deep understanding and of your psychological makeup. So often when somebody comes and they're really struggling, I do pass them down the line. I do say, look, I think it might be a really good idea for you to go and talk to somebody that you trust. I never say a therapist, but I say I wouldn't do it with a friend or a family member, but find somebody that you really trust to explore this side of you. Because when you start peeling back I call it I'm recently calling it kind of like the veils of illusion and delusion that we carry. We all do, or the masks that we wear, or whatever, however you want to call it that. So I do have a list of people that I'm always sending clients to, especially when they've got ancestral issues that they really need help with. I send them to Family Constellation.
I do the same. That's why I love it so much. So we both send people to EMDR therapists, family constellators. I mean, the fact that we are so similar.
Yes.
Because I think of myself, and I think you the same, as we're diagnostic people, but we're not the mechanics. So
No.
we send people to the mechanics, but
yes.
Can you explain to people what you think about family constellations? Explain what that is, just for people who don't know.
Well, in my experience of family constellation, you come together with a group. It's best, I think, to go as a stranger. Don't go with other people, but just have the courage to step in. You'll be so welcome. You'll be so well held. And when you start working on your particular story, you become a witness to it, and you choose people that you instinctively feel represents that part of yourself. So you could see somebody in the corner and say, I just feel you can represent my mother, or it could be somebody else. You represent my father, or you represent my grandmother, or whatever it is. And then they start instinctively playing out the relationship between them. It's so instinctive, and you start to watch how the relationship between these people start to unfold. If you've never been, you think that's nuts, but actually once you've been, you go, well, of course.
It is outrageous what can happen, and I don't know how to explain it, because when these people are moving around in the room, they're not talking.
No, they're not.
That's what makes it even more incredible.
Yeah. And they're having real reactions to each other. So it is, I mean, I just feel like, you know, there's some times and some practices, and I'm sure you've had it as well, when you've just got the something happens between you and the client, or you and the group.
Yeah.
And I call it that, when God walks into the room, because something else takes over, and suddenly you kind of feel like you're being held in a different way. And that's the only way I can explain that. And that I don't think we have words to describe what that is. It's such an intensely personal and subjective experience. But the clarity comes, and that's when the healing comes.
Yes, and that particular experience, unless you're feeling it and you're witnessing it yourself, it's hard. It's not something you can intellectually explain to another person. I say it's like if you go to a magic show and you see a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, you go back and tell someone what happened. It sounds like not that interesting.
Absolutely.
When you're there and you're experiencing the magic, it's like, wow, he just did that. How did he do that?
And people's life completely change, you know. The other thing I'm really, really aware, because I used to work as a psychotherapist, and are you ever retired as a psychotherapist? Probably not. But but I'm very trauma aware, because I was a trauma therapist. So if I feel like somebody's really struggling with unresolved trauma, and lots of clients are, what I do suggest is they go and see a trauma therapist, or and I do suggest something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And I used to work with that with my clients. So I really trust that as well. So I'm very hot on trauma, and I'm not there to be a trauma therapist with them, but I'm there to spot and help them understand that they could be stuck, especially, for instance, often if Pluto is in the 4th house.
Yeah, that 3rd and 4th house, I think, both Pluto in those locations, tough.
Yeah. Pluto in the 12th. Pluto in the 8th, or the 8th house, very heavy emphasis on the 8th house. I mean, you know, so I'm very aware of that. Now, I'll be very careful, because the one thing you don't ever want to do is re-traumatize your client, but you can actually raise a very gentle flag and say, maybe you just need a little bit more help here.
Do you find that being a medium plays a part in when you're doing a reading? Because a lot of times when I'm doing a reading, because I'm a medium as well, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just getting this total download of what happened to you when you were 6 or something.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yes, that happened for you?
Absolutely. And it's I'm very so I get visions. I get like a vision, but where it really comes for me is when I'm working with the nodal axis, because especially when I'm thinking about or tuning into where what they brought in with them. What have you brought in with you, especially if there's a planet associated very strongly with the South Node? That yes, I can get very strong storylines, which I say to them, look, we can only talk archetypal story here, because we don't know what's real and what isn't. If you resonate with this theme, we'll go with it. If you don't, then fine. So I do that as well. So, and I explain that, you know, that the brain is always trying to make sense of what's happening in somebody's life. That's what the brain does. And it has to make story to make sense. Otherwise, it's kind of chaotic. So the hippocampus needs to make story. So I find that really helpful as well.
Do you think that the North and the South nodes are sort of your secret power in a chart as a reader, as an astrologer?
I think they're the calling.
Okay, you think that's the calling right there?
I think that's the James Hill.
The calling being the North node more than the South node, the North node.
No, I think that the South node is involved in the calling 100%, because it's what you've brought in. At first I used to think, oh, you've got to leave that behind and, you know, do this great big North Node journey. I don't think that anymore. I think it's actually about how do we, I'm so interested in the opposites.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fact that the astrology is all about opposites, pairs, opposite pairs. And I think the North Node and the South Node are, it's how do we find the balance? Because if you're just North Node, you kind of, I think that's out of balance as well. And if you're just South Node, you don't have the, you don't have the kind of courage to step out of what is known, even though it might be really distressful in there. I was just with somebody the other day and doing her chart, and it was very evident from what she was saying, she's never stepped out of the South Node. It's too much for her this time. But this is what I love about the Dalai Lama. He said, you don't have to do it all this lifetime.
Wow.
He does. And I love that. And so I'll often say to people, if they feel like, you know, you don't have to do the journey. You don't have to walk the fire. You're being invited to. But, you know, you've got to have a certain resilience, resourcefulness. You've got to have a certain deep understanding of who you are and a real desire to answer the call of evolution. And for some people, do you know what? That's too much, and that's fine.
Right. Do you ever feel after you've given someone an astrology reading that when you're done, you wonder what will happen next, whether they'll take the information they gave you and do something with it, or how do you prepare for a reading, and how do you take care of it after a reading? What's your before and after?
Yeah. Okay. Before, okay, I say the meta prayer. So
what's the meta prayer?
So the meta prayer is, I wish you to be happy. I wish you to be well. I wish you to be at peace and at ease. I wish you to be in touch with your higher self. I wish you to be free. So I hold that person in my mind's eye and I say the meta prayer with them. Then that prepares me and I'm ready. So I spend about 2 to 3 hours sometime on a chart, depending on how complex it is. Wow. So I really know, and I normally prepare them the chart at least a week beforehand.
Wow.
On the day before, I'll spend a good half hour or, you know, so also tuning in again to what I've written and making sure that still tallies up, because I might see something different. Then I do the meta prayer and then I start the reading. I mean, obviously they don't know I've done the meta prayer, but that's what I do. That's my ritual.
I was wondering about that. Did they hear you do it? And then you do them on a Zoom or on a Zoom? You actually see the person?
Yes.
Oh, because I never want to see my clients. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, no. I have to.
You have to see. For me, I cannot, because they give me too much information and I just want the chart to talk to me. I'm so visual. I'm like, I will start interpreting. I'll look at their background. I'll be able to tell what kind of house they have and how they dress. And I want to be able to tell people how I think they look and what I think their house looks like.
Oh, no.
That's interesting.
No, I have to have them on Zoom. I don't like doing it person to person particularly.
Oh, yeah, that's way too much, isn't it? That is so intense.
It's intense.
Oh my God, people have no idea what it's like being an astrologer, right? It's an intense thing. You're looking into someone's soul. It's a privilege, right?
Yeah. It's a funny thing, isn't it? The word astrologer, is that what we are? Are we soul guides? You know, is that a better, I mean, I don't know. I mean, astrologer is astrologer, isn't it? And people recognize, they understand immediately when you say, well, I'm an astrologer, there's a sort of free soul. Oh, are you? You know, or either that, oh, really? You don't believe in that crap. But we're more than that.
I totally agree. Both of us have so many, we bring, 30, 40 years of study in all metaphysical realms. Yeah. Also for me, I know a lot about health and healing just because of my own physical stuff. Yeah. So I'm constantly helping people with physical issues. That's kind of medical astrology has become my thing now. But I agree with you, like being a medium, being an astrologer may only be about 20 or 30% of what I do, even though I'm
Interesting,
known
isn't
as an
it?
astrologer. Do you agree with that? Like there's so much else going on.
Yes, there is. There's layers and layers. Well, actually, I'm now back at school with the College of Psychic Studies, doing a 10-week course on mediumship and a psychic awareness, because I want to up my skills.
Whoa, that's
So
awesome.
I've gone back to school. I'm loving it.
That's so great. Now,
Yeah.
let's talk about you as a medium. So do some people hire you just to have you talk to a loved one who's passed?
Okay, so that used to be my work. So for 10 years, I worked as a medium and a tarot card reader. Actually, I used to do all the big society balls in London, and also I used to do the psychic fairs. But my main thing was tarot card reading, and I don't read tarot anymore. The tarot have left me. But
that's very interesting.
Yeah, they were my best friend for years, and now I don't read them anymore. I've definitely moved on to astrology. Well, yeah, astrology is the main thing for me, but I just feel more and more drawn to going back to using mediumship skills and psychic ability skills. I'm still working out, and I still can't make sense of this, how it all works, because when I've studied the passage of the soul, let's go Buddhist.
Okay.
You know, the fact that we die, our physical body dies, and a stream of consciousness continues like a river. And at some point, whatever that stream of consciousness happens, it incarnates again in another form. I can get that. I can understand that. So I can't slot into place and make sense of it. So how does mediumship work? Then I was with somebody the other day and gave them a reading, and I saw a granny appear as just plain as if she was standing right behind her. And I said, "Oh, is your grandmother in spirit? Because I can see somebody here." And she just immediately, started crying. And Granny gave me some proving factors. Now, how does that fit in to the Buddhist concept that there's a stream of consciousness, but there's no personality? The personality dies. But in mediumship, the personality is still there. So that's why I've gone back to school. I want to know. I want to try and work this one out.
So what I've noticed
by it.
Well, I don't know. I'm fascinated by it too, because I just did a mediumship session yesterday. I had a client whose son died tragically, and I'm doing her chart, and I saw in the chart, she didn't tell me that her son died.
Yeah.
I saw in the chart that she had trauma with a child. And so I said, oh my God, he's here right now. I can feel this pressure coming in on me, and it can physically affect me. Have you ever had that happen where you feel somebody really wants to talk to your client and you're like, oh my God, I got to tell this person. So
yes.
we started talking, and the guy the son who had died, he was so funny. I mean, he's only been dead for a year, but he gave very specific things. He turned himself, well, I don't want to give the examples, but anyway, I realized for me that the only way it works is if it's a triangle. So it's me, another person, and the person who passed.
Oh, okay.
And I feel that without that triangle, I can't do anything.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
I don't know, I'm just telling you that so that when you go to school, you can help understand more about it, because I don't understand it either, and it's super weird.
It is, but I'm getting more interested in this whole concept of imprinting, of telepathy, of how telepathy works. I've just been rereading The Testimony of Light. Have you read that?
No, that's do you have a copy of it you can hold up? All right, good.
I'll be back in a second.
It helps to visually see the book.
This is the most extraordinary book. Written by a woman called Helen Greaves. Now, it's a book about. So she was great friends with a nun, and basically the nun said, "I'll come back if I can after I've died." She died of cancer, and Helen Greaves was basically looking after her. So, nun dies, and then Helen Greaves starts getting the presents, and she's died. And this book is about the nun's experience of what happens to her after she's died. And I tell you, it's absolutely mind-blowing. Now, whether it's true or not, who knows? But I tell you, this book is full of light.
Wow. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I mean, it still doesn't answer my query about, so you've got people who've died and they're able to communicate,
right?
And the Buddhists thought, no, there is no personality after you've died. And the esoteric teachings are like this as well. You know, there's only a stream of consciousness. Well, that doesn't fit together for me.
I agree.
Yeah. So that's why I struggle. But both work for me. You know, yes, I can imagine there's a stream of consciousness and we incarnate again. And yes, I have had many experiences of dead people coming through me to say, I've got so and so here, does this make any sense to you? And the answer is normally yes. So it's fascinating.
And what's the number one thing that you find people who have passed over want to tell their loved ones?
Well, it's always about love.
Yes.
There's nothing else for it.
They always want to say, look, I'm alive. I'm not dead. How could I do this unless I wasn't here?
I think for me, it's this expression of love, and I'm sorry, or I know, will you forgive me? That often that's happened quite a lot. Or I didn't understand who you were and I did my best, or messages like that can come through, but there is this abiding sense of love. And at the end of the day, Leslie, that's it, isn't it?
Right. It's the most powerful thing on the planet, don't you think?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on right now. A lot of people are having a tough time because we're going through so many changes. And I think that we were talking about this before we started recording, that I feel like the veil is very thin right now between our history, our reality of what we knew and where we're headed. And feel that if you don't have tools to deal with being on a thin veil line, very scary time. So what do you think is happening?
Well, whatever's happened, back in February, Pluto moved into Aquarius. So we all know that was a massive shift from dense Earth Capricorn into, airy old Aquarius. Let's go or go off and be techie. We could the other side of it. Let's just be kind to each other. Humanitarianism. So that's all been going on. But I think the interesting thing for me is this massive shift with Saturn and Neptune coming together. And of course, Saturn's it's moving into 0 degrees Aries. Now, Saturn, and it's going to be holding hands with Neptune, really till 26, when it becomes completely conjunct, early 26. So this whole year, I think, is about what does that mean? And I think for me, Saturn is about rules, boundaries, but manifestation. And of course, Neptune is about visions and ideals and ideas and yearnings or whatever. So put the two together, and I think we've got a lot of profound the possibility, the higher possibility of really profound spiritual teachings manifesting on Earth. On the other hand, I think we're also, because Saturn is about delusion and illusion, we're going to have a lot of people setting themselves up to be teachers that aren't necessarily have everybody's best interests at heart. And you've got Saturn there as well, the kind of, the father figure, patriarch, back again. So I think it can go two ways here. And I think I say to everyone is just be very, very cautious about what you feel is true, and then double check it.
That's really good advice, because I think Saturn next to Neptune, those are not happy bedfellows together, if you ask me. I think that they inherently are uncomfortable together, but something beautiful can happen when you put two things together that don't normally come together. That's
Absolutely.
where it can be amazing, but it could also be very intense.
Very intense. And you know, that's the state of humanity. And
Right.
we all know that there is utter chaos going on in the world. But if we can draw on the higher aspect of Saturn, which is about reality and growing up and taking responsibility for ourselves, and that's what it's all about, spiritual responsibility for ourselves, then maybe we do stand a chance to really shift what we understand consciousness to be.
Yeah.
I'm just watching and waiting. I'm not making any assumptions on anything right now.
Well, I don't think any of us could ever imagine what will come, because there are some things that are beyond our even imagination, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you one other question about astrology. So when you look at your chart, is there a planet that I always feel like we're from a planet? Like that's just the way I tell my stories. What planet do you think you're from? Which planet do you feel really resonates with you the most?
In my chart or out in the cosmos?
In your chart alone, yeah.
I think it has to be my moon, because my moon's in Virgo and it's the apex of my Thor's hammer, and it's right on my MC. And I think it's just run my life. It's always been of service of some form. And everything that I do is about deeper healing or deeper understanding, or I've never sought notoriety or anything like that. And often the moon in the 10th house can
definitely do that. But you are very well known. Tell everyone about your books. How many of you've written? A lot. How many? 7 astrology books. That's a lot.
No, not astrology. No,
Oh.
Astrology. No, I've never written an astrology book. Not yet, but one is in the pipeline.
Okay, so I don't remember what your books are about.
So I wrote about, this is back in, a few years ago now. I wrote about women's rituals a lot, and brought astrology into them. But they weren't astrology books, but they were about how to create ritual, how to draw ritual into your life. So I did quite a lot of them. And that was my maiden name, that's Sue Bose. And then later on, I wrote about when I was working as an end-of-life researcher with the lovely Peter Fenwick. He was a neuropsychiatrist, and he was my boss. After that, we wrote Nearing the End of Life, a guide for relatives and friends. I then wrote the D Word, talking about dying. I then wrote a book on menopause, because I was going through menopause, and it's called Sex and Meaning in the Menopause. And then in 2000, over COVID, I wrote Living Fully, Dying Consciously.
Wow, so a lot of books about death.
Oh, I love death. I'm so fascinated. Well, I mean, I'm so thrilled to be able to say this, but Shift Network are going to be running my a 7-week course that I've designed called Astrology and Mortality, reconnecting with the great cycle of life and death. So that's starting in the autumn, and that will turn into a workbook more than anything else, I think.
So you are well known for the work that you've done. You've been published by major publishers, and I love the fact that you've got this wide swath of experience beyond just astrology. And I think that's what's necessary in order to be a good astrologer. I think without the things that you've studied all the way, your astrology would be quite narrow. So you have this big, many years of studying so many things that all comes together into one package when you do the reading.
Yeah. Well, I do feel like this course is that because I'm bringing together my love of astrology with my love of talking about death and dying. I mean, I couldn't be happier, really.
I've always loved going to cemeteries. Do you like going to cemeteries?
Oh, yes.
This was a dumb question, but I find them to be the most peaceful place, and hardly anyone's ever there. And I just love them. Here in Florida, we don't have cemeteries. Isn't that weird?
Oh, really?
Well, I've seen maybe 2 in the 25 years I've lived here. But in New England, where I go for the summer, they're
Yeah.
everywhere. And I'm like, yay.
Yeah, well, that came over, with the settlers from England, because we love a cemetery over here.
Yes, exactly.
We love a cemetery. And
So
that was very Victorian.
you have no fear of death. Like I have no fear of death, right? Yeah.
God, no.
I
No,
think it's going to be so exciting. I mean,
me too.
I'm afraid of how I will die, but I'm not afraid of
Yes.
dying. Yeah.
Well, actually, it's interesting. I'm talking to my GP next week because he's going to be signing an official letter for me, so that I don't want any form of resuscitation or life extending treatment, and it'll be on any notes, any hospital notes. If I've collapsed at home, that people know that I do not want to be resuscitated. I'm really clear about that. I will not be taking any form of medicine because I want to die as naturally as I can. That's really important. And what I love about Carl Jung's teachings was he was, because he was a wonderful astrologer, of course.
Of course, amazing.
Yeah, and he was saying
it for many of us,
Yeah, oh, absolutely. What he was saying, after 40, after your midlife crisis, really your second half of your life should be preparing for your death, taking responsibility for yourself, and being of real service, so that when you reach the end of life, then you have a feeling of, yes, I feel complete. And that's the most important thing. That's my journey now. I'm 72. And at some point, I'm hoping before I'm 80, I will leave my body behind. And then I'll get all the answers about whether I turn into a flow of consciousness or I become an ancestor saying, I want to go and talk to my grandchildren.
Well, hopefully you come visit me and you can tell me all the secrets of life if you die before me, which may or may not
we could have that. We could do a Helen Greaves.
Yes. Oh my God, that would be so funny.
Yeah.
So listen, tell people how they can find you. I highly recommend Sue. And I was saying earlier about her last name. I think your last name, Brayne, is so perfect because you're dealing with, our minds when we're working with people. Yeah. So how do they find you?
Okay, so it's Sue Brayne, BRAYNE @gmail.com. And my website is suebrayne.co.uk. But I've actually closed my lists now for readings. I'm not sure when I'm going to open them. I've got quite a few in early autumn, but I'm going to be focusing on the Shift Network, preparing for that. So I'll probably open my lists again January.
Okay, well, someone could write to you now and give a spot for them.
Yeah.
And how do they sign up for the Shift Network class? How do they do that?
So that's a good question, because it's literally just been confirmed. So if anybody's interested, if you write to me or let me know, I will then pass on the details to Shift Network. They're going to let me know what to do and how to do it next week. So it'll all be on my website.
Great. And then you also have a YouTube channel and you interview really interesting people.
I do.
Just plug your name into YouTube.
Yeah, it's called Sue Brayne Celebrating Astrology.
Okay, awesome.
And I love talking about astrology in all sorts of different forms.
Okay, good. Awesome. Sue, I can't wait to talk to you again soon. This has been so much fun. I could talk to you for hours. I just think it's so nice to find a kindred spirit out there who's got a similar path. And I think it's so crazy that Stuart Wilde is what brought us together.
He did.
Because if you hadn't mentioned him on your website, I don't know if I would have contacted you.
Probably not. No, why would you have done?
No, I mean, it just wouldn't have. I thought, because I never, ever hear anyone talking about him, which I think is quite a shame. And I'm really glad we're talking about him, because I think it's very useful right now for understanding how to traverse the new territory. And without tour guides, and I think you and I are both for people to how to navigate what's coming. You're a busy lady right now because the world needs you.
Well, it needs anyone that can take responsibility for themselves, really. That's the key now, is just learn to take responsibility for you, and whatever happens in your life, just know that you're the creator of it, however odd that may feel, or however no, it isn't. It is. And it's just about being really aware about that and taking those first steps to going, right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take responsibility for that.
And the first step is learning about how you're designed, right? So astrology.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine your life without astrology as a tool for understanding? I do everything through the lens of astrology. Do you?
Everything.
Everything. Yeah.
I mean, I would, it's so helpful. It's just so helpful.
Yes. Very lucky.
I don't know how it works, but it works.
Yeah, there's some things we may never be able to explain.
Let's hope.
So Sue, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.